Hello, hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? This is amazing. This is the first time in 8 months that we have done this, and I want to welcome you to the Digital Orthodontist Live. Yeah, this is exciting stuff. Scott, am I showing? I hope so. I'll spotlight myself for everyone. There we go. All right, so let's jump into this. We've got a huge night. We've got a lot of people out there. It looks like well over 100 so far. We'll have a lot more coming in. We had approaching 400 sign up for this thing, and we hope to pick up some more as we go. I promise that it's worth tuning in tonight. There's going to be some incredible stuff to come. So I am your host. If you don't know me, I'm Dr. Kyle Fagala. And hey, look, I'm on there. That's great. And tonight we're going to have 9 inspiring and incredible people with us. During the first hour tonight, we're going to discuss the good and bad of 2020. A lot of us like to focus on the bad, but I promise you there's been some good. What we've learned, and not only the fact that we've survived, but a lot of us have thrived during this time. For that segment, I'm going to be joined by Austin, Texas practice owner and mother of 3 adorable children, Dr. Jeannie Moody. I'm also going to have with me the orthodontic transaction expert and my ortho dad, I like to call him, Chris Benson, and the person that I most associate with treatment coordinator coaching, Leanne Panici. I'll also be spending some time catching up with the founder and orthodontist at Lightforce Orthodontics. That's Dr. Alfred Griffin III. You may remember him from the meeting that we did back in April. Lightforce was a huge hit. They've had a great year, and they're sponsoring tonight's event. So they're the presenting sponsor, Lightforce Orthodontics. So thank you to them. He's going to be discussing new updates to their system, and he's going to highlight how 2020 has been an incredible year for them and for digital orthodontics in general. Really looking forward to that. During hour 2, starting at 8:30 or so, we're going to roll up our sleeves a little bit. I will love that. We're going to have a nice, relaxing holiday happy hour together. If you were at the AAO, we did a happy hour. It was a huge hit. Had a great time. So we're going to do that again. But in honor of the crazy year that's been 2020, we're going to make a cocktail. It's going to be called the Coco Loco. You can find that recipe card. It's actually on tdolive.com. It's in the Facebook group, the Digital Orthodontist Facebook group, and we'll walk you through it. It's a really easy drink to make, and of course, you can drink whatever you want. So that happy hour, it's going to be co-hosted by my good friend, the co-founder at Neon Canvas, and the marketing mastermind himself, Alex Rasmussen. We're going to have with us Dr. Plastic Fantastic and the owner of the best hair in all of ortho, Jonathan Nicozisis. Then we're going to have Dr. Manhattan, I'm calling her, aka the purveyor of Smile Pop, Dr. Courtney Berry, the Raging Cajun, Who Dat, Mr. Life of the Party himself, Dr. Chris Feldman, and a very impressive orthodontist blogger and entrepreneur, the unorthodox Dr. Patrice Smith. But before we get to all that, I have an editorial. So it's going to be more fun when I have more people on the screen, but let's start with just me for a sec. I'm so red. It's been stressful getting ready for this, I think. I do want to take a couple minutes, though, in sort of the form of an editorial, sort of like a monologue, I guess. But I want to share my thoughts about the year 2020. There's no doubt that the history books will have plenty to say about this year. And no matter who you are, where you live, what you believe, something has happened during this year that has upset you or depressed you or taken you off your game. And to the people out there watching tonight who have lost loved ones this year, maybe to those of you who haven't lost loved ones, but you've lost friends, over disagreements about politics, or maybe just due to distance, or that you feel separated from your friends. And to those who have struggled personally, financially, emotionally, spiritually this year, I am truly sorry. This year has gotten the best of me in many ways, so I absolutely sympathize with whatever it is that you've gone through. I have felt down and overwhelmed and tired so many times this year, more than any other year that I can remember. But I have to say this, and it's not to downplay the importance or significance of those things. I know 2020 has not been the best. Heck, it's been awful. But it's the only year that we have. And I think it's up to us to make the most of it and to be grateful for the ways in which we are supremely blessed and fortunate. As orthodontists, and those of us working in orthodontics, that's all of us, let's be honest, we have a pretty great gig. What we do is fun. It is rewarding, and we have a great community. And I'm really fortunate to be a part of that community. And I don't want to lose sight of that. I want to continue sharing and helping and growing together. We won't always agree, but we cannot allow that to get in the way of the greater good of life and of this profession that we happen to share. And I've sensed in the groups that things have kind of slowed a little bit. And I don't want that. I want things to pick back up, and I want to continue working together, even though it's been a tough year. And so I'd say this too, if you're struggling, if you're really struggling, you need to reach out to someone. If this has been an extremely difficult time for you, and the holidays are always kind of like that, but during COVID and all this, it's probably more so. You can reach out to me, call me, text me, whatever. I'm 901-207-0604. You can do this too. Text someone from residency that you haven't heard from in years. I got this idea from Anil Adikula on an episode many, many months ago. Or text a family member or a friend that you've had a falling out with recently. Don't let 2020 be worse than it already is. Make it the best that it can be. And don't forget, and I love this quote, the most valuable moments are often free of charge. It's free to forgive yourself and to forgive others. That's totally free. And so in that spirit and in the things I talked about, let's work together tonight to learn some new things that will help everyone. And let's leave our time together tonight feeling uplifted, inspired, and energized. All right, so let's go ahead and bring on our guests. We're going to bring on Jeannie, Chris, and Leanne. If you guys want to start your video, start your audio, we'll get you on here. Looks like we got a solid 40, 45 minutes to get through this. And what we're going to do in this section is we're going to talk about the year 2020. And we're going to discuss that, discuss some of the highs and discuss some of the lows.
There's Jeannie.
Got it.
There we go.
There we go. Hey, gang.
All right. There's Chris. How you doing, Chris?
Good.
There's Jeannie. Hey, Jeannie. How are you? We're getting it worked out. And there's Leanne. Hey, Leanne. How's it going?
It's going great.
Let's see if we can get this view doing better. I'm going to remove
Hey,
my
Kyle.
pen.
Hey, guys.
Hey. So we've got 40 minutes. We're going to discuss 2020. I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I picked you guys because two of you have red hair. That's not the only reason. There we go. And then Leanne, you have gorgeous blonde hair. My wife is a blonde. So, but we're going to get through some things. We're going to kind of go back and forth and kind of talk amongst ourselves. First off, just thanks for doing this. I know there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue. I think we've all felt it, virtual meeting fatigue, whatever you want to call it. But it's been good to spend some time together for sure. So I kind of want to start out with this. Chris, you're known as sort of the numbers and stats guy. I'm curious what you could just tell us in general about orthodontists and orthodontic practices and how we fared during this very strange year.
Absolutely. Well, we bounced out of a really strong 2019 as a specialty in the U.S. anyways. Everybody really had good 19s. That's the best year we've had in a long time. First 2 months of 20 were really strong for most practices, January and February. And then all of a sudden, here comes March 15th. And most of you closed down for 6 weeks, some a little bit less, some on the coast a little bit more. And I think the most I've heard is 12 weeks, but most people six weeks. So that's 6 weeks of zero production. And then we opened back up in different times, but June, July, August, we were hearing consistently best months I've ever had in my practice. Just incredible demonstration of how practice owners stayed in touch with people, had a plan, worked with their consultants. It was just amazing to see the bounce back. It's much stronger in size and duration than I thought it would be. That's lasted all the way through November, really. A little bit softer in December from what I can tell. And I think it's going to be a little bit softer the first quarter of next year. And then hopefully the vaccine and some of these things will be done. So our prediction is at the end of this year, if you did not have a consultant, you didn't do as well. We can talk about that later. But they proved their fealty over and over. We found out we did better as a group because we needed a sensei, we needed a Sherpa, we needed somebody to guide us that was talking to multiple people. I think if you didn't have a consultant, you're going to be down 15 to 25% in production December 31st compared to 2019. You're going to be down about half of that in collections. And if you did have a consultant, you're going to be even to -10 in production and -5 in collections. So it's the consultant practices did really well. Unfortunately, that's only 20% of the practices in the country. So most people will be down. Going into next year, the first quarter is going to be a little bit soft, I think. And then I think we're going to start to see we're not going to see business as usual in 2021, in my opinion, until maybe the last quarter. But it's going to take a while. We're going to have to implement digital. That's part of, thank you, Alfred, for sponsoring this as part of what we learned in this process. But all in all, I think we did much better than our peers in dentistry, the other specialists and general dentists, and a lot of other businesses, because we had cash flow. The PPP worked. We spent a lot of time and got exhausted on these webinars, these Zoom meetings, learning about that. But I'm extremely pleased with how everybody's done, and I think this group fought for their patients, for their practice, for their teams. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, very well said. So you think consultants play a role in it? Obviously, I'm not going to disagree with that. I think that I think most often the degree to which you're informed and able to speak with others, which is really one of the strengths of the Facebook groups, but obviously sometimes that can have a negative effect. I think Jeannie's going to talk about that perhaps a little bit later, but as long as you're getting good information and you're allowing it to motivate you and empower you and not depress you or take you off your game, I think it's good. What about geography, just real quick? I know, we're all from different geographies. I think we have 3 time zones represented. Sorry to the mountain time zone. But how do you think geography played a role? Obviously if you're closed for 6 weeks versus 12 weeks, that's simple math, but
Yeah.
has it had an impact on the buying behavior that you've seen with practices?
I think so. I think that the West and East Coast took it harder on the chin than the core of the country, or the South, just because those states were shut down for much longer and there was more restrictions. So that's kind of always been the case. It's been harder there, but there's more people there, so there's more opportunity in one sense there. People are crawling out slower in the Northeast and in California and up the coast, but still very resilient. Comebacks in those states have still been really good.
Yeah. Well, I'm proud to be in the core of the United States. I'm going to put that on something. Jeannie, I guess you're in the core as well. So right on. So you're in Texas, you're in Austin, which is sort of like the not Texas inside of Texas on some levels, maybe. But and I know that the shutdown hit you hard, like it did all of us. I mean, just kind of get this out of the way. And we've talked about this ad nauseum and all these groups, is how unprecedented it was, how difficult it was. But you shared with me a really personal story about just sort of how it hit you. For me, reading it, it wasn't my exact story, but it really connected with me. And to whatever degree you're comfortable sharing some of that, I'd love to hear kind of about that and kind of what you went through.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if any of us were prepared or ready for what hit us, but I had just gone to, Leanne's office manager course. I had, the best goal setting meeting I'd ever had, and we were just reared up and ready to go. And then all this, happened. And I think for a lot of us that are, parents too, the kids home, and you have a whole dynamic change of the preschool's closed and the school's closed and the practice is closed. So it was a lot. My nanny was off. I mean, she was the first person I wanted to hug after all of this. But I think it goes back to some other things I've shared, with my divorce and my practice, but the inability to control it. We all want to fix it and control it. And for me, I was in these groups and it was awesome. But, one person's in there, selling 50 digital cases, digital consults and selling, and the other person's redoing every system and inventory. And then I was here trying to keep my kids from literally, climbing the walls. And, if you follow me on Facebook, it was funny. It was, our school was SAW school, crap, oh crap, whatever, just trying to survive at home. So I had done really well at not doing Facebook comparisons and realizing everyone has a story, but man, I was having, pandemic envy, here you are, riding your Peloton 10 miles and I'm just, drinking White Claw and eating Cheez-Its for dinner, and everything was out the window. So I think for me, just the challenge was I can't control it. And I had to finally just lean into it, and whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And I embraced it. At one point I said, okay, we're having Christmas. This is May. I said, we're having Christmas. Go wrap up what you can find. And that morning I said, I don't want to do Christmas. I said, we're ready. We want Christmas. It ended up being this awesome day. We made, Polar Express, and it's 100 degrees in Austin, and we had Christmas, and we had stuff like that that they remember now. They said, well, why do we need to buy stuff? We're just going to wrap stuff up we found, just like our last Christmas, and they don't realize it was in May. But it took me a little while to lean into it and not be stuck with the mindset of the stuff I couldn't do and the things that were happening, and sort of lean into I wasn't a big TV fan, and now I've seen, all of Netflix. And I think leaning into it and realizing like, hey, it is what it is, and let's just embrace it and change your mindset. That took a few good weeks, maybe even a month to get me
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's great stuff. This is my first tier up of a podcast in several months. But that's just great. I mean, anyone who, has kids at home, just such a challenging time for them. Of course, they're more resilient and they don't know to think any different about it. And they're, excited to wear masks and things like that. And then to get a gaiter, and that's cooler than a mask. And, all these sorts of things that kids go through, and how they see the world is so different than how we see the world. And of course, the stress that we have, it goes right off onto them when we come home and things. So I spent that break watching my wife be the you in your story, minus the
Yeah.
White Claws. Not a fan of White Claws.
Yeah.
But, she's the one that's keeping the kids together. And then we had a nanny that was excellent during that time, that I think her job duties were going to be a little bit different. And then all of a sudden the kids were home for 6 months or whatever. And I was working on a digital meeting during that time. So, but just like you and just like all the other orthodontists and team members out here, we were inside the groups trying to learn things. And and there was some different emotions at that time for sure. So,
Yeah, and the thing you said about, reaching out, I posted a couple things, on some of these groups, and I just said, look, it isn't all roses over here. This is my story, and
mm,
it's not everybody else's right now. And I posted some vulnerable stuff, and I
yeah,
talked to people I've never met, and men, women. I talked to a guy that's, had bankruptcy and divorce, and you know wondering if he should do bankruptcy, or kind of just had these really vulnerable conversations with people I'd never met. I'd never really interacted with some of these people. They weren't, people that are always, in our banters and in our conversations. And so to take the time to have those conversations, 30-40 minute conversations. I mean, I called Chris at one point during all this, but to have these conversations with people about just big life stuff, more than just ortho and, I don't know, that surface level stuff, but to have these conversations with people that I'd never met, I'd never interacted with. Some of them I'm terrible at names. I probably couldn't tell you their names, but I just felt like it made us all a little more human, and it brought us a little more, kind of down to earth, because, sometimes you hear the banter and everyone's doing great, everyone's crushing it. And I think it kind of checked all of us in our egos a little bit. And I feel closer to my fellow orthos, and I did rely on people more than I ever had. So I feel like people put their guard down and needed somebody else, and were more open about it. And I think that was really good for our profession. And people like Chris and Leanne and these people in these different organizations that really went out on a line to educate us and talk to us and be some of those guiding lights for us on the laws and the PPE. I mean, those people are some true heroes, because it shows how much these people really care about us, because some other companies and other people didn't quite step up the same way. So it was nice to see that they were in it with us.
yeah, yeah, for sure. That's great. Yeah, you get to see who the true leaders are in times like that. And you can lead in different ways. And your vulnerability in that post in particular, the couple that you're speaking about, had an impact on me as well. So let's shift on into this. And I want to come back, of course, to a more hopeful tenor later, as we talk about how things have bounced back for you, Jeannie. But Leanne, you're obviously very well known for treatment coordinating, coaching, and a lot of other stuff. But I think that's primarily, when I think of you, I think of that. You're actually, you might be the first lecturer I ever saw in orthodontics. And it was a full room, and you had all your people, like, it was like, this is like amazing. It's a big production, And so you work with people across the whole country, just like Chris. And so that's part of why I wanted you here, is because you have that perspective that maybe Jeannie and I don't have as much of. So obviously during this time, it's a little bit harder to sell braces or aligners or whatever when we aren't allowed inside our practices. What did you find, during the lockdown and immediately after, that really worked in terms of case acceptance and growth and those sorts of things?
Well, when when the lockdown happened, there was absolutely, everyone knows, there was a virtual frenzy. It was the hot remedy out there, and everybody ran to do the virtual consultation and be an expert. And they tried everything, and it worked. It worked for that time period. So as far as case acceptance goes, people that did virtual exams, they were committed. They wanted to get started with treatment, even if they couldn't get into your office. So it was very successful for that 6 to 8 week period. And it's still successful now. Virtual consultation, it'll continue on. It has its place. It had its place before the pandemic though, but it's just more prominent now. However, when the offices opened up, people crave normalcy, and the new patient exams, the backlog from your March, your April, if you're closed for a part of May, all that backlog came in. And of course, those patients were excited and they had high case acceptance. They started treatment with you. By the end of June, what I saw was pretty much people had made up for that backlog. And, Kyle and Jeannie, I don't know if you felt that, but then when the third quarter, July through September, and Chris, you can jump in here, I saw record case acceptance across the country. The people that left the safety of their homes and came to your office, they were committed. They wanted a beautiful smile. They left their home, they went out into a healthcare office, an orthodontic practice, and they came in, they wanted to start treatment. Same day starts were high, case acceptance was incredibly high, probably the highest quarter I've ever seen in my career. And that's, spanning 30 years. The challenges that I saw in the summer were some people scheduled down. And so their new patient exams were down, but it wasn't because their calls were down. It just meant their schedule was down, because if they had 2 TC rooms, they were then using 1 TC room for D-bands, so they could seal off the room, so they could only have half the exams. So when we identified that, then we had to, have a workaround. So in a lot of offices, we ended up doing that old traditional exam. Patients would come in for records, and they'd have that appointment on a non-patient day, and then they would come back the next week for a 30-minute consultation. Again, high case acceptance. But we had to find workarounds during that period until people were comfortable, ramping back up on their exams. So what I found was interesting, and maybe a little bit different than what Chris was saying. You said December was coming in a little bit soft. I started seeing offices get a little soft in October and more so in November. Mm-hmm. And part of it was new patient exams, but a huge reason for that was because these were new clients that were calling saying, the bottom is falling out. Well, the bottom really wasn't falling out. It was back in October. I'm sorry, not October, back in April and May and part of March, those observation patients that they didn't see and didn't schedule them back in 6 months, that slipped through the cracks. And when they staffed back up and they got those patients back in, their active patients back in, they didn't call their observation patients, get them seen and get them scheduled back in 6 months. So those people weren't seen in October and November, and those observation patients would have been ready to start. So they lost those starts. So as a whole, I've seen a great recovery, and the areas that are the misses are things like observation. The patients that are coming in are excited. The offices, we still have staffing challenges. We still have people that have not come back, will not come back. Staffing has always been a challenge in ortho. It's just a process that you go through for, 40 years of your practice. You'll always be staffing. But that's, Kyle, that's pretty much what I've seen.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think, each practice is going to vary a little bit. I saw a lot of people talking about November and how it was soft. And I think the conventional wisdom that it was related to, the election and just kind of things around then. And then, of course, numbers have started to come up. I actually think December is the one that's felt like not a ghost town, but just a lot of people not showing up. I think sort of concern over all that, and then just, maybe just wanting to survive to Christmas or something. I don't know, but definitely some trends there, and yeah, very, very well said about all that. So, Chris, let's shift into this. I want to talk a little bit about some positive stuff, and that was positive too, what Leanne shared. I mean, the fact that we were able to come back. You go back to April, we're like, what's this going to be like? The whole AAO, the TDO meeting, those are both painted by this fear and this doubt. And of course, we try to take a hopeful approach and say, well, what can we do? How can we empower ourselves? How can we work together? I mean, that's always been my approach and always will be. It's not to fear monger or to try and sell products to take advantage of people. My hope with something like this podcast and with the efforts that I put forth is to help people, to give away things that are helpful, which should be the goal of everybody, is to give back things that you have. But at that time, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what it was going to be like, if we're going to be able to bounce back, if people are going to want to come back and get orthodontics, if we'd be able to do orthodontics. So the fact that we've been able to do that, to me, is really the story of the year, is that we have been able to bounce back. And it's been weird at times. It's been depressing at times. It's been overwhelming having to deal with all the PPE and everything else. And I don't think this is the new normal long term. Hopefully, I don't want to wear a hairnet the rest of my life. But I think it's okay. I think it shows that there is, resiliency in what we do, that people do want to have straight teeth and that they do value what we do. So for you, Chris, what are some pleasant surprises from 2020? And then we'll talk about some challenges, but what are some of the pleasant surprises?
It's actually a pretty long list. When I think about it, I think number one, outside of orthodontics, outside of dentistry, is just the economy. I mean, personally, I was calling my broker and going, I think I want to be in all cash by, June, because I thought things were going to tank, and who would have thought we're here, and, just setting records in the economy. So everyone's 401k, everyone's retirement plan did really well this year. That was a huge surprise to me. And I think we're set up for that's going to be good too, even with this, transition and change of leadership in our government. So that was a surprise. I think, the biggest thing for me in orthodontics, probably two things early that we learned was when you think about where did we all go from March 16th to March 31st, we all went to the Facebook groups, and we all went to Zoom, and we'd never been through it. I'm not an orthodontic practice, but I act the same as one from a business standpoint. So I've got 10 people. I've never laid anybody off before. I thought my business was going to go in the tank. And I was learning about PPP just like you guys were, and, learning about all that kind of stuff. And it was exhausting. But what we found, what my business found, and what I sense orthodontists found, was we operate better together when we're sharing with each other, and when we're in groups. Now, when you're in a face group, as kind of Jeannie mentioned, and it's just really disparate, it's almost too many views. I tell residents when they tell me, I say, where do you want to work? And they go, I don't care. I say that, well, that's harder than I want to work in Kansas City. And so I think, those Facebook groups were just, almost too broad, too many opinions. But when you drill down and you listen to a Kane Waters thing, or a McGill thing, or some of the stuff that you put out there, Kyle, or Jeff Bayhan put out there, and many of the consultants, and the consultants rallied their internal kind of client base, and they kind of came up with, here's some solutions, folks, that you can use. And we thrived in that. So we work better as a group. That was one big takeaway. And then digital was huge. Leanne kind of mentioned it. It was here before. It really shortened the cycle of acceptance from the consumer. It shortened the cycle of acceptance from the doctor and from the team, because we all tried it. And like Leanne said, it worked. I think that's here to stay. I think it'll grow. I think it's bigger. When you look at just digital in orthodontics, you see Alfred Griffin is sponsoring this meeting, and you look at the young orthodontists that are out there doing some amazing things, along with side Alfred. Got Dr. Owen doing his thing. You've got this orthodontist at Chapel Hill, Chris Bonebreak Jackson, who's researching how to print metal brackets custom. You've got what John Pham is doing with his group. I mean, there's some under 40 orthodontists that are doing some pretty amazing digital things, and digital is going to be the way we go. Kyle, you and I laugh, we have some conversations about, aligners versus brackets, but it's going digital. And I think we see that, and that cycle got shortened. So those were some of the things that, I think were good on the consultant side. I'm not pandering to Leanne because she's on this or anyone else, but those practices just did better because they had a leader. And I just did a resource minute today about this because the data is just so crazy. Only 20% of orthodontists in the country ever employ a consultant ever. It's just nuts because when I think about return on investment, it's tenfold, 15-fold, 20-fold what you spend with any consultant. So, those practices did better. We saw that again. I think when you look at challenges, going into 2021, sustaining, the bounce back, I really do think we don't have a V-shaped comeback. We have a K-shaped comeback. So if you're at a mid economic earner in America and higher, you're going to do really well. If you're a mid economic earner and lower, it's been doubly tough on you, I think. And so it is a K-shaped recovery, in my opinion. And if your practice caters to that mid to lower economic strata, I think it's been tougher on you than it has on the higher ends. And so I think we've got to get through that. It looks like maybe the government will do some help for us. One big surprise to me was that overheads are down 5 to 10% in all practices this year. How come? We didn't spend as much money. We got really efficient. We really
Frugal.
tight. The PPP really worked. And so even though our practices are down, we're making really good incomes as orthodontists because our overheads are down. Now that's going to go back up as we crawl out, but we really tightened up the screws on our overhead. So it shows you kind of what's in our businesses when we really start paying attention, right? And we can take that away and do better. But I think the last thing is, along with digital and working from home, what some consultants have told me is, and Leanne kind of touched on this, we had to push our schedule volume down or rearrange our templates because with how we had to treat, we couldn't see the people. So your only option to keep your volume of new patient exams or whatever appointments up was to add days, which we didn't necessarily do. But I think we're going to have to deploy our teams a little bit differently in the future, and we just got a taste of that. I think people can work from home and for doctors and be productive. I know Karen Moad told me if I could just get staff to come to the office and have a full team, I'd be great. But I can't do that right now because their kids are in school or at home because they're not in school. And so when we get back to school, things will be in many ways much better for our teams to come to the office. But as leaders of our practices, we may want to have a ClinCheck coordinator, have a virtual coordinator that can do some hours at home because they need to. So, there's a lot of things coming out of it, but, we learned a lot. I learned a ton personally. And maybe we'll talk about that, towards the end, but I think mostly good things centered on digital, centered on working together as groups. And, we got to be careful going into the first 6 months of the year, but I think you're going to end December 31st, 2021, very similar to where you were in 2019 or above.
Well, I certainly hope so. So along those lines, you're talking about bouncing back and never thought of a K-shaped growth curve. It took me about 5 minutes to figure out what that meant. I'm not good at spatial reasoning. My wife knows that very well. But in the spirit of bouncing back, Jeannie, you kind of shared about sort of, I don't know, like the valley that you found yourself in, that a lot of us found ourselves in, all of us, I guess. But the bounce back, and in some ways it makes the bounce back sweeter. And I think to have, life distilled down to its core and then to be able to build it back up, there's something empowering about that. Maybe that's a longer conversation, but, and so I think that's happened this year too. So it's almost been like a metamorphosis of sorts with our practices. Some of us, as we've lost team, or some of us maybe cut down on our team and build it back up. There's been a strengthening through that. I think that's been really beautiful to be a part of. But for you, I guess, what does this look like? And as a leader and as someone who talks about leadership a lot, what are some of the things that you focused on that helped make your build back possible?
For me, I think I was already fairly essential with my time and where I spend my energy. But this really, dumbed it down to, you have no social life. You're not doing any, meetings. Um, so I feel like in the practice too, sort of, finding out what was essential and what didn't really matter in selling braces. And I was really fortunate. I had everybody come back but one. And I didn't really realize that until I talked to colleagues. And even now, colleagues that lost, 70, 80% of their staff. And I laid them all off right away. I wasn't one of these really generous doctors that was able to pay them. So I think it spoke to our connection and me leading differently in the last several years as far as trying to set people up to be successful. And when they aren't successful, looking at my role in leading them as part of why they're not successful. I mean, obviously, you don't show up for work. I can't always help that, but I think really trying to put people where they were going to be successful, and with this whole comeback, and the changes, and trying to keep them educated and up to date and feeling confident, but also just trying to find out what works and being a little more flexible with things, a little less, rigid and ironclad with, policies, and um, somebody being a few minutes late because they had to deal with a kid. So I think it just spoke to our team and sort of how tight we are, as a group, and how we kept in touch and cared about each other. I think it speaks volumes for practices that could do that and stay in touch. And like I talked about in other meetings, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been real fluffy and, you know, I don't know. I'm just more of a straight to the point, or kind of funny. I'm not real super warm and fuzzy about how things are. And so I feel like that's been awesome. And setting back and still looking at the blessings and stopping and being like, man, I've got a friend with one assistant, and I'm texting her like,
Mhm.
hang on, man, you got this. And
Mm.
other friends with multiple issues, and me sitting there complaining because, maybe somebody's slow and I've got a full team of staff. So um that, and then just being confident, but also being willing to tell them like, hey, I'm not sure which is going to work better. Yesterday I joked, I said, who the hell's idea was it to work with no lunch from 11 to 6? We laughed because it was my idea. I thought like, we'll just power through, and I'm like, that's horrible, like I need a snack. So um I think being willing to tell them when you're not 100% sure, but you've done your research, you're trying to lead everybody in the right direction, keep your patients safe, keep your staff safe, pay the paychecks, grow the business. But also sometimes, it doesn't work, or it was a bad idea. And I think um, being confident, but being able to kind of put your guard down sometimes, and let them know that you're learning and you're on top of it. I think that's huge for people too, because I think they trust you more when you're a little more human.
Yeah, yeah. I think vulnerability was forced in this time, because as orthodontists, I mean, it's one of these jobs where it's always up, it's always good. I mean, largely, at least from my perspective. I wasn't around during '08 and '09 and kind of some lean times. I was in dental school and headed into residency during that time, so I've only been around when it's just good. And so for I think our teams to see that on our faces on some of these like Zoom calls we had when we didn't know what the heck was going to happen, and when we're having to let them know this is strategically what we're going to do, we're going to furlough you. That was a new word. That's a word of the year. Um, and just be strategic about ways to keep the team together and to communicate. And I remember doing Zoom calls and like just feeling like I hope they stay here, like I hope that they stick
Yeah.
with this. And so that vulnerability that they could see on our faces and I could see on theirs, again, it's sort of like going through dental school together. And, we always likened it to being in the trenches together, which it's not. I'm not trying to equate those things, but, you go through a moment like that together and you're closer after that. So I feel like our team is as close as it's ever been. And some of that
Yes.
has come through the vulnerability, but it's also come through empowering them and realizing that if they stuck with me, then I can trust them with a lot more. And
Hmm.
as you said, and this is a really good takeaway for tonight, is to not, make a mountain out of a molehill, not to pick at every little last thing. And I had that tendency, and I think a lot of us do, as sort of OCD perfectionists or whatever we want to call ourselves. And so that's been another lesson. And Chris kind of got at that too, is what's most important in your practice? What's most important as a leader? And can you cut out the other chaff that's just sort of in the way? So for those who have not bounced back, and Jeannie, you got at this, is that for every person that I know that's real public about how well they're doing, or that I talk to that's just, they're doing great, there's people out there who are quietly not doing so well. And some of that could be a fault of the practice that they've, fostered and built. As Chris kind of alluded to, it's, been better for certain types of practices or demographics or geographies or whatever. But for those that maybe have not bounced back or haven't experienced this, or they're hearing this and are like, I wish that was my conversion rate. What are some things they can do, Leanne? Like, what are some things as they head into the new year, and maybe not even the ones that are just failing, but the ones that are kind of flat and just feel like, when is this ever going to get back to what it was? What are maybe 2 or 3 things that they can do and kind of focus on?
Um, I will answer that in one moment, but I have to say something
Yeah,
to
of course.
Jeannie, if you don't mind. So Jeannie, when you were going through all that, I know I always comment to you on Facebook. I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart, everything I write on Facebook and everything when you were posting with your children, and I was working 20-hour days and didn't get a shower for 4 or 5 days, through all of this in those first weeks, we were literally 20-hour days here. You were the inspiration. So you were the light and the laughter of my day. It's because you were out there posting with your kids and jumping in mud puddles and all of that. So you were having a rough time of it, but through that all, you inspired me. You kept me going. So I just really want to thank you, especially after hearing what you had to say.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah. Yeah, bottom of my heart. So what's the advice to someone who's still trying to rebuild and struggle? One is what I've noticed when I get calls now, it's that, you know, a little bit of I'm giving up, it's the sky is falling. And what I'm telling offices to do is first of all, go back and what made you you? What built your brand? Who were you? Because that's still who you are now, and getting back to that basic. What works for one practice isn't going to work for another. So going back to kind of the building blocks of your practice, who are you? What do you stand for? How did you show up in your community? You still get to show up in your community. You still get to show up with your professional partners. You all, can handle the digital world for them. But let's use professional partners as an example. People go, I can't get into my general dental offices. I can't talk to the dentist. Well, yeah, there's this thing called a telephone. And you pick up the phone and you call them. And a very simple thing is if they get a new patient phone call, a referral, when you hang up that phone, pick up the phone, call that general dentist. When Irma answers the phone, the receptionist, if it was Dr. Rubin that was calling to say thank you, he'd say, hey, Irma, this is Bud Rubin. Would you pass on a message to Dr. Benson and tell him thank you so much for referring the Smith family? I really appreciate the confidence and support. That's the basics that I'm seeing people, they won't even reach out to the general dentist to say thank you because they can't go drop off some cookies. They don't want your cookies, but they want your thank you. So going back to those basics. Can you still do lunch and learns? Yeah, it's called Zoom, and you can still offer CE credits. Get yourself back out there if that's the practice that you had, that you were built on professional referrals. You need to show up. The other, in your community, be a leader out there in your community. So you can be an influencer. Every orthodontist out there, you're the top 5%. You're strong, you're smart. Go back out there in your community. How can you help all those other businesses? I remember when I lectured for the AAO, I told them, invite the food trucks into your parking lot. Let them, when your moms are waiting outside and they can't come into your office, have a food truck that's a coffee cart. You're helping a local business and you're being memorable. You can show up again. The Scouts are coming back again. They're still going to have Zoom meetings. You can still be out there with the Scouts. February is National Children's Dental Health Month. That's the time you're going to go out there to your general dentist and you're going to get back out there again and remind them you want to see kids at age 7. You got to get the fight back in you, but you got to get the plan. So sit down. There's a lot of great ideas and you need to write up your plan. You got to go back to basics. And here's something that kind of makes me sad. It is that I hear that everyone's so happy that the moms can't go back to the reception room and they have to wait out in the car. And And I get it, but at the same time, those mom brought that child to your office, and that's part of the energy and the fun in your practice. And that poor mom is having to do homeschool or virtual school. She's probably taking care of her parents. She's having to take care of everyone in the family, and she can't get a break. This is your time to make a difference for her. You can be the light in her day. You know, the goal is always to be the best part of somebody's day, but you can really make a difference for her and be the brightest light in her day. She's an alpha mom, and she's out there and she'll be talking about you. So that's what I say to offices now for 2021. Get your plan in place, you know, get back out there again, you know, dust yourself off, go back to who you are, what do you stand for? You can still do all of that. It's just in a different way, depending on where you are in the country.
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome. So that's sort of the kind of the summary theme is really sort of the rebuilding of things. So we sort of have like a crash and the rebuild, and that's, you know, emotionally and spiritually and, you know, functionally as orthodontic practices. I think that's sort of the story of the year. You guys all did a great job of summarizing that and getting at the different pieces of that. I want to end on just a very short segment. We've got about a minute left. I would just love, because I want to end on a hopeful note, and that was a hopeful note, Leanne, so maybe we could just end it there. But I want to end just by hearing one or two things that you're thankful for, maybe what you're most thankful for. Because for me, that's it. That's the year. This is the year where you're sort of boiled down and you're left looking around at the things that matter the most and the things that, you know, in the midst of all this, that you're still thankful for. So, Chris, what has that been for you just real quickly this year? What are you most thankful for?
Yeah, my team, all those Zoom meetings, we talked more together in 3 months than we probably had in the previous 3 years. My family, I got to spend a ton of time that I normally don't get to spend with them. And, you know, just this new craving to be out with you guys. I got to travel just a few times during COVID recently, and I was jazzed. So I'm ready to get back on the road.
Yeah. There was Chris Feldman popping up. Jeannie, what about you?
Yeah, I think I had some really great friends, but I had, you know, best friends in ortho school 10 or 12 years ago, and I talked to them every single day, Justin Owens and Stephanie Ross. But we talked off and on throughout the years, but we talked every day, and we still talk every day. We text, you know, daily. And so it strengthened some friendships that were already fairly strong, but it made them that much stronger. So I'm really thankful for, you know, my friendships with my friends I grew up with since elementary, but also some of my great ortho friends, and reconnecting and sort of knowing what's up with their daily lives now instead of every now and then. Um, my team, I felt like they supported me and carried me more than I thought they would. And it's been really amazing to see that. And you know, you guys, I told somebody in something, I said, you better not see me at a meeting because I'm hugging every one of you. I don't even care. You're all getting hugs. You know, maybe we name tags. I've got the vaccine, but I'm coming for all of you because I just have a newfound respect and love for you guys and for the people that have gone through really similar things, you know, even when they varied. So I think that that's it. The friends, the family, and the colleagues who commiserated and held each other up throughout this. And again, call me too, email me, text me. I don't sleep much, so I'm here too for anybody that wants to chat. And you know, I like I said, I call Chris Benson. You know, can I move to Mexico? Should I sell it all? You know, you know, I have my moment of I'm gonna take all my money and put it. I moved my money to a different bank when I found out that bank could take it if I defaulted on my loan. So you know, I felt better.
I think a
I
lot
didn't
of us
sell it all.
called a lot of us called Chris during this time. You know,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's a, a
I
popular
literally was
guy.
like, I'm gonna hide money. I think I still have money hidden in the house, but you know, it all worked out, and I think we can always bounce back, and you can always begin again, whether it's your health or your business or your relationships. Like you can begin again tomorrow, like start over, like Leanne says, like get back to it and get up and fight. You know, and if you have an off day, tomorrow's another one. Try again.
Yeah, for sure. Leanne, real quick, just one or two kind of just quick ideas, if you don't mind.
I'm gonna ditto. It's, you know, the
Yeah.
team that I work with, I'm most greatest blessing, but they're also friends and they're also family. So I get to put them all in one. And I'm really appreciative of my husband. My husband actually let us open up our house to teach our academies in my living room at my home. So
Wow.
Jeannie was here in the conference room, but now it's actually being taught in my living room because of social distancing. So
Wow.
is one of my greatest blessings.
Well, mine is much the same. The teams at Neon Canvas, the team at Saddle Creek Orthodontics, and then my family, my beautiful wife and my kids. That's been everything, certainly this community too. So, and all three of you for coming on this show. I appreciate it very much. And for christening, well, it's not christening the new year, I guess, but it's almost there. We have some giveaways we're doing tonight. There's a lot of stuff going on tonight. There's a lot of people out there. We're going to do some giveaways. This is from Leanne. Leanne was like, hey, do you need any giveaways? I was like, sure. What do you have in mind? And she had like the most amazing of all giveaways. There's Jonathan Nicozisis. Hey, Jonathan. Not yet. Not yet.
Sorry.
Jonathan is at the
He's
AAO,
ready.
it looks like. Ready.
He's gone.
But she came back with these giveaways. She's giving a pair of 1/2 carat TW. Don't even know what that means. Diamond Halo
Total
drop
weight.
earrings. So diamond earrings. What is TW?
Total weight.
Total weight. Okay. 1/2 carat total weight. It's a $700 value of earrings. Chris, did you know? You probably did. We're going to wait and give that away at the end of the night because I kind of feel that that's something that everyone's going to want to win. She's also giving away 2 seats to her treatment coordinator intensive workshop, which is $925 a seat. Extremely generous. And then she's doing something that's really amazing, which is 1,000 meals with a person practice name. So in their honor, and she's going to do 5 winners of that. So that's 5,000 total meals to hungry families. Leanne texted me back that last night, and I got a million things I'm working on. And I was like, are you kidding? Like, I can't take diamond earrings from you. But thank you, Leanne. That speaks very highly of you, and you must be a great gift giver. So I want to get on your gift list. But we've already pre-selected these. We did a random drawing, and because I didn't want to like pull out of a hat or something. And the 2 seats to your treatment coordinator intensive workshop was won by Min Win, who I hope is out there. I actually know Min. I interviewed around the same time with him. He's a great guy. And then the 1,000 meals, it'll go to the following 5 people: Bill Taylor, Martin Avi, Neil Patel, Alyssa Madsen, and Haley Stumbo. So if you're out there, you just got some really awesome stuff. Okay, thank you guys so much. We're going to push to a commercial really quickly.